So Reading is an interesting phenomenon. It's called poverty flats for a very good reason that is not well understood. So Reading is just far enough away from the Sacramento, San Francisco kind of Silicon Valley complex to be kind of outside of the orbit of the event horizon that is a supermassive black hole, which is the economy of the San Francisco Valley. That economy is so large and is so powerful that it sucks out of here. And if it wasn't for agriculture in the Central Valley, it would suck out of the Central Valley at a worse rate than it does, but it sucks a lot out of the Central Valley. It's very hard economically for farming and Central Valley stuff to exist because of the existence of LA and San Francisco, which are two supermassive black holes economically. Because of that, what happens is two things. There is a culture that develops here that is a mindset of poverty. In a mindset of poverty, you try to prevent things being taken from you. Now, for growth to happen, you have to basically invest, okay? But poverty is all about, okay, looking out for how do I protect myself, which actually doesn't lead you to the right decisions. And the reason that happens is because here you're so close to a supermassive black hole that you don't get very many turns in your economy from the same dollar. And do you have a dollar bill? Do you have the gold one, actually? It'd be fine. Yeah, this will be fun. So I want to show a principle. So in San Francisco, and in the supermassive black hole, it is the San Francisco Greater Industrial Complex, and the same thing in LA and kind of that whole region between LA and San Diego. Money turns a bunch of times when you spend it in that local economy before it leaves that economy to go someplace else. And this creates a lot of value economically, because there's two ways to grow an economy. One is efficiency. Efficiency is growing the value generated for the same amount of effort. Okay, so like when I can work smarter instead of harder, that's an example of efficiency. When I take the value of raw material like seed and turn it into, by planting and putting fertilizer and other things, and I turn it into a crop, that's an example of efficiency because I get a multiple out of that. Those are all examples of efficiency. So this is a thousandth of an ounce of gold embedded in polymer, and it's worth about $1.44. So if I spend that with Karen for something, and then she passes that around, and if this goes through, buys something from Roger, buys something from Terry, and goes back here to Cindy, goes to, goes on and goes around the room. I want that back, by the way. I need that for. It goes right through all these people. That's actually gold, yes. That's actually currency in 4 states and soon to be Texas 5. Legal public tender. It actually carries the value of the gold in the actual currency. It's kind of cool. But that goes through the room and never leaves because of all these transactions. $1.40 went and became lots of economic activity here, okay? So to make this place vibrant, you need 2 things. You need the economic situation to be changed so that there's a reason to be engaged. There's a reason to come here. There's a reason to come into downtown to do stuff, not just to go to dinner, not just to visit your lawyer or accountant, but a reason to come into town. And you have to increase the density of economic activity. So if the number of turns that's occurring in the downtown increases, you increase the density of the economic activity, and you have a reason to be there. The reason that it's interesting to be in New York, inside the city, or that it's interesting to be in LA, inside of the city, because LA is uninteresting to live in at all. But if you want to be there, the reason to be there is because of the opportunity that comes by just being in proximity with so much economic activity, okay? So you have to create that, but you also have to change the culture. You have to change the culture. You have to go from let me protect myself from getting stripped of all the value that I have, which I've not been in very many communities, by the way, that I've personally lived in that have more of that culture than this place does. You have to switch that. That culture has to change. It has to become an investment culture, a culture where you're looking to put money into things because you see future promise coming from them. Okay, and that has to become something that's vibrant and happening downtown. Okay, so I did an economic impact study of a factory being brought into this area, and having that factory participate, bringing the supply chain for that factory into an industrial park, so that instead of buying the goods from San Francisco or from Silicon Valley that the factory used, have the goods being given to the factory, the majority of them produced also here, which means you would get 2 turns instead of 1 before money would leave. Do you understand the difference? And having part of what every employee and every supplier to that factory was given was points in this economic system that they then had to use with local merchants. And the local merchants then being asked to look at whatever you get in points, just contribute it back, okay? So you didn't do any more than that, okay? Whatever gets put to you, just give it back, let it turn. And a $250 million a year revenue generating factory would generate, with these conditions, would generate $1 billion of GDP in Shasta County. That's better than a 10% increase in the GDP produced in the valley. Okay, that's really meaningful. And it would create another about 70% turn in Shasta. Now let me explain why that's important. According to the Shasta Economic Development Board, this is stats maybe 2 years old, so I don't know if it's updated. An average dollar in Redding turned 1.7 times before it left Redding or Shasta County to go someplace else. Most of the time to the supermassive black hole in Silicon Valley or LA. Okay, that's where most of it went. This simple change, a reward system being utilized by the merchants in town, and one factory with its supply chain also based here, would have increased the number of turns by 70%. So this is the equivalent of another 2.5 times. So two and a half times turns instead of 1.7 times turns, okay? Each time you do that, that would compound again and again and again. So as you bring in the next thing and the next thing. And so the way to change a city is to get the people that have the influence in the city, who I would argue are not the political parties people, are not the politicians, but are the churches. If you got the churches to be involved in just getting their members to be part of this kind of rewards program through their businesses, through the things that they're talking about, and got them behind something like an economic activity that brought in a factory that produced whatever the number is, 50 million, 100 million, whatever the number is would be here. You would actually change, you would start to change the city, you'd start to change the downtown. As long as you inculcated the culture with the economics at the same time, you would start to change it. And that change would happen very fast. The model that I ran predicted that that change would occur in 2 years. 2 years, okay? Not like an infinity from now, not like after we get all these things happening a decade from now, 2 years. And there is plenty of capital, there's plenty of stuff that could be done by just organizing people who wanted to change the city from the churches that are in the community. Now I'm going to give you a secret. If only 10% of the people participated, and if they gave a tithe out of the stuff that's created here from this economic stuff to those churches, none of them would need a single dollar of tithe to pay for any of their staff in 7 years if only 10% of their people did it each year for 7 years. That's 10% for 7 years, so 10% each year, so a new 10% each year. So first year's 10%, second year's 20, second year's 30. In 7 years, that all of the church staff, not its buildings, not its other stuff, but all of the church staff would be entirely subsidized by this economy of a typical church. Okay, so here's the point. We have what's needed to transform our city in our hand. We just need to change what we do. There's two changes that are needed. One is we need to, when we have people of wealth, means, you want to stop giving the wealth to people that are going to use it for Babylonian purposes. You give it to people that are going to use it for kingdom purposes, not foolish stuff, but not stuff that doesn't make any sense economically, but stuff that does. And when you have commerce, start favoring others that are going to be at least willing to be a citizen of a new way of doing things. At least want to participate in something as simple as a reward system, so that you honor the people that are willing to do that, because that will change the city. That will change the city. Now, to give you an idea of how powerful that is, if you take not just the factory, but if like everybody in Reading was part of this, okay? What would happen is if you took all the commerce that happens in Shasta County, which is about 6-7 billion in GDP that's created here, you put it through God's system, okay? You would get a multiplying effect on that would be something in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 times. Okay, I just want to let you think about that. So instead of the GDP being, let's say 7, it's 70. All right, now why is that important? Okay, there's two ways. What Satan wants you to do is focus on the people that are wealthy in the super black hole and say, they're the enemy, let's go kill them. No, actually, God's system doesn't work that way. The way God says is do quite different. It's like, you need to become bigger. Because what happens is if you start to develop more mass, more economic activity, guess what you create? You create a pool that is insulated, has a wall that protects it from the event horizon of San Francisco and LA. Okay, you create this barrier that starts to have its own gravity well, okay, but without a black hole. And the more economic activity that builds, the more that builds, and the more it prevents being stripped So when you just stop the stripping, that's all you have to do is stop the stripping, okay? You just have to stop it for it to completely revolutionize this place, or any second or third tier city in any country around the world, or even a small nation. You just have to stop all the money leaving the nation. You know, the country of Zambia just needs you to stop taking all the money out of Zambia. You know, if you do that, it will, as it grows economically, it's going to basically have money to double down and invest in its infrastructure and do everything else that's going to create more money, that's create more wealth. Because economies are not like your checkbook. They don't work like your checkbook. They don't have what comes in has to go out. Once this goes out, it's not there anymore. They work like that. Oh, we got to get that back. They work like this, going around and around. The more turns we get of the same money going around the economy, and the more efficiency we get out of any one of those turns, the greater economic growth, and the more economic growth, the greater value generation. And the value of the economy is not measured by its cash flow, it's measured by its GDP value over future years. That's why the US government could print $4 trillion. Actually, they printed a lot more than that, but that's a story for another day. But the reason they could do it is because they're basically just tapping into investor belief that there will be a lot of value that will be created out of the tax revenue in the future. And so they can do that. That's why Apple is worth 26 times the amount of cash it produces and far more than its revenue. Same thing. That's why okay? So you create value out of that. That's what it does. Anyway, can I just want to finish by this slide, and then we're done. Wow, I'm on time. Amazing. What those who are involved with the Sweet Economy are trying to do is we are trying to get people to realize that they can participate in building a country with as little as their commerce, that they can build covenantal relationships instead of transactional relationships, that form a kingdom culture that is more concerned with the character, as Martin Luther, than the color of their skin, as Martin Luther King said, that uses God's protocols to create a common infrastructure of trust that supports an economy that has incentives that causes people to create mutual value, irregardless of who they are. They can be Muslims, they can be Satanists. Doesn't matter. It's if you're willing to be bound by those protocols, you can create mutual value. The sun is supposed to rise on the good and the bad. And we can collaborate in ecosystems like that factory story I was telling you about. That was a whole ecosystem play. To deliver new products and services which create the experience that generates the commerce. And this just goes around in a circle.